Hello and welcome to today's KKE, folks. My name is Ron, and it looks like I'm going to be the only one here today. My compatriots are off busily working on other projects, probably preparing for the Dell World User Forum, formerly known as Case Conference. So we've got coming up at the end of the year. We have been putting together some really cool stuff for y'all at the user forum this year. So hopefully you'll be able to come and attend and check that out with us. But on to today. Today we're talking about Wake On LAN, and you can see the typical standard abbreviation for that is WOL. So I'm probably going to dispense with the full spelled out through the rest of the document and just stick with that abbreviation, that acronym there. So we're going to talk today about how that actually works. It's shrouded in mystery, but it really is quite simple. And so we're going to talk about that today. And it has impact for our case customers with both the K1000 and the K2000. There may be things that you want to do with either of those appliances that Wake On LAN can be immensely valuable and helpful in. So, something to think about. Okay, what we're going to talk about today. First of all, did you know that the K1000 can send out Wake On LAN packets? Okay, it can wake your machines up if the rest of your network supports it. A bunch of caveats there, and we're going to talk about all of those today. And furthermore, not only can it send them out, but it's not just an on-demand thing. Go wake up these machines right now. It's something you can schedule. So we can accomplish overnight tasks, for instance, even if machines might not be active and awake. Well, before we do, as always, a couple of preliminaries. First of all, the KKE program. I want to make sure all of you know that you can get to the recordings, most of the recordings each month we post on our recording archive website, case.com/KKE. Not only, of course, can you come to the upcoming sessions, but you can also get to the recording archive. For instance, yesterday, all of the July recordings that we posted actually made it to the website. So if you missed any July KKEs, chances are they're on the recording archive. You can go watch them right now. Or, maybe after today's KKE, then you go watch those, right? And I'm going to keep hammering this because I rarely ever get feedback. I really, really want your feedback. I really do. That contact the training team link comes to a couple of us here at Case. We'd really like to hear from you. Anything about the KKE program, you like it, you don't like it, what you want to see us change, topics you want us to cover. We've had people reaching out, ask for topics. I got them approved. They're on the list. We're going to be doing them coming up later in August and in September. Okay? So, anything else you need to know or you want to tell us, anybody here at the training team, that's how you contact us. Let us know, and we'll respond to that just as quickly as we can. Versioning. Okay, these are the current GA versions of our products. Right? Anything we talk about today going to be current as of the most recent GA version. Anything we might take a look at later on, again, I'm going to be showing you what the current version is. Lots and lots of self-help resources here. Okay? If you need help from us, you contact Case Support. Preference is the direct web interface, support.case.com, but you can also, of course, send email to generate tickets. You can access our support knowledge base, and we have a wealth of knowledge base articles out there for you to find help with all kinds of issues. And we write new ones every single day that get posted. Okay? So hit up the knowledge base, search for what you're looking for. You want to talk to your fellow customers, IT Ninja is the place to do it. Okay? This really ought to be your first stop. Okay, because you're not only going to get a lot of the information that we have at case.com cross-posted over at IT Ninja, but you're also going to be able to collaborate and to communicate with other customers that are doing the same kind of stuff you want to do and the same kind of network you want to do it with the same base appliances. Okay, so make IT Ninja your daily stop. Feature requests. A lot of folks don't know that you have input into new features in your case appliances, anything at all, whether it's an improvement to an existing feature or a completely new feature you want to see added. That's what case.uservoice.com is for. Okay? Lots and lots of things have already been requested. You can go there, read up on them, and vote on the ones that you agree with. Move them up the chain. They're going to get included in the case appliances download faster. You don't see one already there? Submit it yourself. Others will vote on it, move it up the chain, and it'll get included in our InkPad newsletter. And we write articles for these monthly. And as trainers, support techs, a bunch of people here at Case, we write all kinds of helpful little tips and tricks type articles, sharing resources with you might not know about, and so on. Okay, so you can sign up there, and you can also see all the past issues as well at that particular website. Now that that's out of the way, let's get on with the meat of our presentation today. First of all, we're going to go over what exactly Wake on LAN is. Okay, it consists of certain technologies and protocols and so on. We're going to cover that first of all. Then, of course, we're going to talk about how to set it up, specifically with your network, the machines, the K1000, and so on. We're going to cover a couple of use cases, right? The specific sections where or tasks that you might be performing where it can be particularly useful. And then finally, of course, as always, Q&A. We'll unmute the mics and let y'all, we'll get a roundtable going, get some discussion going, some questions and answers and so forth. Alrighty then, so let's jump in. What is Wake on LAN? So it's just a protocol for a certain type of network communication, like a ton of other protocols that exist in the in network communication. This one is specifically for remotely powering on or waking up machines on a network. Okay, and there are some prerequisites. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in a moment. But it is a broadcast protocol. Okay, as we'll discuss in a minute, that means it's layer 2. It's pre-layer 3. This is no IP addresses because NICs aren't active. They don't have an IP address. This is meant to be a broadcast across the network. We can describe that in more detail if that doesn't make sense to you in the Q&A part. And it uses what are called magic packets. I don't know why they call them this, but that's the types of packets it's sending out on the network to wake up machines. It's currently and traditionally only supported on physical wired connections. Wi-Fi doesn't pass that kind of traffic. It doesn't work exactly the same way that wired networking does work. Okay, and then as I mentioned, there are lots and lots of prerequisites. Okay, for instance, and for starters, Wake on LAN is UDP traffic rather than TCP type of traffic. Okay? It runs on port 7. You may be familiar with various network ports. For instance, port 80 is HTTP, port 443 is SSL, and so on. Well, Wake on LAN is port 7 UDP. And incidentally, the K1000, when it sends out the magic packets, it sends 16 packets per request. And that's because it's having to do a bit of guessing on the broadcast address for a subnet. Okay, so a little bit of under the hood kind of information there for you. And so I am also going to include really quickly a link for you in the chat window. I encourage you to go, all of you, to save that into your notes. It gives you some more information about Wake on LAN. Okay, it goes to that's an Intel page and it goes in a little more detail on exactly what Wake On LAN is, how it works, what the traffic consists of, and so on. Okay. All righty. So now that we have a basic understanding of how of what it is, let's talk about how to set it up. So as I mentioned, Wake On LAN is broadcast type traffic. So when I try to communicate with your file server, right? So I've got my laptop and I'm trying to access a file share on a network. I'm doing directed traffic and one-to-one traffic. I'm going directly to a particular host. But broadcast traffic is broadcast because we don't know the narrow host that we're going to. We're trying to find it on a network. You think about DHCP. If I don't have an IP address yet, I can't communicate on your network in a one-to-one fashion. I don't know where the DHCP server is to ask it for an IP address, and I couldn't communicate with it even if I did know. So I send out this megaphone-style broadcast onto your network. Says, hey, is there anybody out there that can do DHCP? And the DHCP server's waiting for just those kinds of broadcasts and says, yep, that's me right here. From this point on, no longer broadcast traffic. And the two hosts know each other, they can communicate with each other, and they start talking directly to one another. Okay, so broadcast traffic is pre-IP. When a network connection tries to establish itself, it doesn't yet have an IP address. It's going to first establish a physical connection. We get the link light. We're physically connected. That's layer one. Okay, there's 7 layers to the OSI model, 1 through 7. And so we build on top of that a protocol, or a connection type, right? A connection language, Ethernet, that sort of thing. And so on. And we build on top of that. Layer 2 allows us to do ARP, Address Resource Protocol. I can't remember what ARP stands for. Anyway, it's broadcasty type traffic. And then we get an IP address, and now we've got layer 3. And now we can communicate in a normal fashion. And then we have applications and so forth built in the other layers on top of that. You can go, I probably should have grabbed a link for the OSI model. It's interesting and useful and helpful to understand how all that stuff works, doing anything on the network. But especially understanding the difference between broadcast type traffic and unit-directed traffic, directional traffic, where the hosts know each other. So the thing about a lot of broadcast traffic, layer 2 traffic, is since it's not IP-based, it doesn't understand subnets and how to get across them. It is, by definition and by default, limited to the one subnet that you happen to be on. That's how wide broadcast can echo around. It can only survive the one subnet. Unless you configure your network equipment to allow certain broadcast traffic to transition across your subnets, across your VLANs. Okay, we've already got the question in chat. We're going to address it later. Okay, the only way that you can make your broadcast traffic, whether it be UDP port 7 Wake On LAN or some other kind, DHCP or whatever, cross subnets, is by, I believe DHCP is UDP 53, by the way. The only way you can allow that to cross VLANs or subnets, IP subnets, is by reconfiguring your network equipment. Whatever equipment is enforcing your subnets. If it's just layer 3 capable switches, if it is routers, firewalls, and so on, whatever stands between the K1000 or some other system that's trying to send out Wake On LAN packets, and the machines I'm trying to wake up, whatever network is between me and it, it's exceedingly likely, it is very, very likely, that those machines are configured by default to block, disallow that kind of traffic from crossing from subnet to subnet. Okay? It's very important to understand. If you're trying to wake up machines in another office, or you're trying to wake up machines that are in this office but on different floors or across different switches or on different subnets, whatever the case might be, then you've got to reconfigure your switches, routers, firewalls, whatever's between the K1000 and those machines, whatever's between your magic packet source and those machines. You've got to enable that traffic, reconfigure them to allow that traffic to pass across subnets. Okay? And as we're describing here, Wake on LAN has nothing to do with operating systems or software or anything like that. It is simply broadcast across the hardware physical connection of a network. Okay. Now, when it comes to your computers accepting that traffic, so let's say you've got the K1000 is fine, you've reconfigured your switches and your routers and firewalls, and you can now pass Wake on LAN packets across subnets wherever it is you're wanting them to go. That's all done, but the machines still don't wake up. Okay, well, we got to check out the BIOSes of the machines. First of all, does the BIOS support Wake on LAN? It may be that you have a very, very old version of the BIOS software running on the machine, the firmware. You may need to update the BIOS to get Wake on LAN support in there. It may also be that the network card that is installed in that machine does not support Wake on LAN. So we've got to verify that we do support both in the BIOSes of our machines and the network card that's installed in the machines do in fact support, and the settings are there so that we can enable that support. Okay? That's another key area or potential breakdown is if we haven't enabled it in the BIOSes, if it doesn't exist in the BIOSes, then it doesn't support it, and so on. Chances are that all your BIOSes and all your network cards do in fact support it. It may just be that you need to update the BIOS to a newer version. Okay? Wake on LAN support's been around for quite a long time. So, number one, does your NIC support it? 2, does your BIOS support it? 3, have you enabled it yet? Okay? And when it comes to making any sort of BIOS changes, recall that we have done a KK in the past on a really neat little tool called the Dell Client Configuration Toolkit, CCTK. We did a KKE a few months ago called Dell Tools. In that one, we covered, among other things, the CCTK, how to use it, even push it out from the K1000 to reconfigure the BIOSes of your machines to, for instance, enable Wake on LAN. Okay, you can do that from the comfort of your office chair. Change the BIOSes of your machines, at least many of your Dells, anyway. Okay, keep in mind, again, we might need to update some BIOSes on machines before they have the Wake on LAN support that we could then enable through CCTK. And somebody asked in chat, what is the command for that? There is no command for that. There's lots of commands for that. You're going to need to go watch that Dell Tools KKE. It's going to tell you everything you need to know about the CCTK. All right, so some use cases. Okay, so anytime that we need to do things to machines and they might be shut down, Wake on LAN is going to be valuable. Anytime. Okay? So if that's patching in the middle of the night, if it's doing something to machines in another time zone, where during that time zone, maybe it's not regular business hours. It's not necessarily night here, but it might be night in Japan, right? Or vice versa. Or even during the day. It could be that lots of people are out. Maybe it's a holiday, or maybe it's a half a day. You think of, I used to work at a place for a long time that had what they called flex hours, and you could work an extra hour 4 days a week and get half a day off on Friday, right? And of course I did that anytime I could. But of course in IT I rarely got to actually take that afternoon off anyway. So Friday afternoons would be a good time to do a lot of things on the network because there weren't as many people around to affect. Right? If I wanted to make some changes on servers or change permissions here or back this thing up or upgrade that thing, Friday afternoons weren't a terrible option because most everybody was gone. You know, a light crew. Tried to keep one person at each department, something like that. But I could do some things, but a lot of the machines were shut down. They shut them down before they leave the office. I certainly don't want to go around and touch them all, right? So I can use Wake on LAN once I've made sure my network and my machines are configured to support it and it works. I can use that to wake my machines up and do things to them. Really, really helpful in that kind of environment. So it's not just for overnight things. There can certainly be business hours time where it can still be very useful to make sure machines are up and running, awake and aware before you actually try to do some things to them. Okay? So now we don't have to be as concerned with, oh man, I hope they leave machines turned on because I want to patch tonight. Right? We got that. We want to turn machines off and save money because energy, power costs money. Right? The light bill. But I need them awake. I need them turned on so that I can do things to them overnight. Well, if we can run Wake on LAN, if that will work for us, then now I don't have to choose between those two things at all. Right? I can have machines shut down, either change my corporate policies and communicate with the users, please shut your machines down when you leave each day, and or I can enforce that with some sort of power management policies, which of course I can push out with the K1000, so that even if they forget, they're still turning them off. So I'm saving lots and lots of power in my off hours by turning those machines off. But then I got to wake them up before I try to perform my overnight actions, my patch runs, my software deployments, scripting some changes, whatever I might be doing, re-imaging machines for my K2000, right? So I can configure and schedule the Wake on LAN packets to be pushed out from, say, the K1000 15 minutes before my overnight whatever tasks would need to be run. Right? So I could have, let's say I'm going to patch at 9 p.m. Right? I can wake the machines up at 8:45. Some machines are a little more slow than others, so I might want to give it a little bit of extra time. You know, maybe 5 minutes isn't quite enough. Give them plenty of time to come up, boot all the way up, all the services get running, all that kind of stuff, communicate on the network, all that. And so maybe I run it about 15 minutes before. It's scheduled for 8:45 p.m. My patch run is scheduled for 9. Patch reboot, patch reboot, patch reboot. I did it 3 hours, so it stops at midnight. And then I can have a 12:30, 12:15, 12:30 script that runs on the K1000 that shuts them back down. I woke them up, I did stuff, I shut them down. So I get the best of both worlds. I get all that power savings for 3/4 of the night time, right? But I still get to do the things that I want to do at night, that I need to do at night to keep my machines running in tip-top shape, right? Peak condition. So Wake on LAN can be extremely valuable in any of these kinds of situations. Okay? And as I mentioned, I threw out there for imaging purposes. I talk quite frequently in K2000 Jumpstart about using, especially the new 3.6 feature of scheduling boot actions. Let's say I've got a classroom, maybe I'm a school and I've got a lab that gets used throughout the week and gets abused by the kids. Maybe I'm a regular a type of business enterprise, non-school environment, and I've got a classroom, say like 30 machines or something like that, that that are used weekly to hold different training classes for my employees. We're training them on the new financial system, or we're training them on, we're doing, helpful stuff that maybe isn't specifically directed at work. I used to hold classes, you worked in the energy company for 10 years, and I would create and hold classes from time to time about, how to avoid spyware. I would teach them good browsing habits, right? How to keep tabs on what your kids are doing online, right? I would teach classes like this. Well, those the classes, we'd have them doing things. They'd all have a computer at the desk in the classroom, and they'd all be doing things. We'd have them, okay, now try this, try that, and we'd have instructions for them, that sort of thing. Well, they would get messed up throughout the week. And so what I can do with a K2 3.6 is I can schedule boot actions to re-image them every Sunday night. Every Sunday night. Well, the problem is I need them to pixie boot. You recall last week we talked about network booting? I need those machines to pixie boot to pick up the boot action. So here's what I did. Okay, I would either they'd be shut down, and all I needed to do was to get them to wake up, turn themselves on, and they'd automatically pixie boot because I changed the BIOS to make them that way. Or maybe they were turned on, and I needed them to reboot so that they pixie boot because I changed the BIOS to make them pixie boot every time they boot up. And then they would pick up my boot action, and then they would get re-imaged automatically Sunday night while I slept. So every Monday morning, you come in, and the classroom, the lab, all set back to the way they were last Monday. All the changes are gone because they got re-imaged. So I could have a script on the K1000 that reboots the machine when I need them to pick up the boot action. And I also have the wake on LAN packets sent out at the same time. So if they're turned on, they get rebooted. If they're asleep, if they're shut down, they get woken up. They get turned on via wake on LAN. So they all get there, they all hit my boot action, and they all get re-imaged. Done. Okay, by combining all of these technologies that we have in the case of appliances, especially if you have both a K1 and a K2, it's like having a whole third appliance. Okay, so there's just a slew of scenarios wherein you're going to get some value out of things like wake on LAN. That's why we include it in the K1000, the ability to send out those packets. You got to keep in mind all those caveats. Okay, there's things that have nothing to do with the case appliance. We don't do anything with wake on LAN. We don't have any control of it. It's just one of those standard network protocols that we try to utilize to make your lives easier. So the rest of your network, like a lot of things that we do, the rest of your network really factors heavily in whether you can use it and how you can use it. So you got to make sure you understand some of these other things and that you check them out. So, are they okay to do for us? Is it not going to interfere with other things we're doing? And that you've actually configured them so that they will work. All right. So finally, that's pretty much all I have for you today as far as the deck goes. And that's because wake on LAN, as I said, is really simple. There just isn't a lot that you need to know to understand how to make it work in your environment. What you're really going to need to do is go learn your network equipment. What is the command on Cisco switches, on Juniper routers, right? On Extreme switches, on Sonic Wall firewalls, right? What are the commands to be able to enable the passing of traffic, specifically in this case, wake on LAN, UDP port 7, across my subnets, where I need it to cross subnets. Okay, that's really what you're going to have to learn. And then, of course, what kind of machines do you have? What kind of BIOSes do they have? How old are the BIOSes? Do they have wake on LAN support in them? Right, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, you got to understand a little bit about some of the potential gotchas. Okay? Remember, recall back to the beginning, I said that we're broadcasting. So when you configure it in the K1000, you say, these machines go away from all. You could, of course, say all machines. You could do that if you wanted to. But typically in the K1000, we're not doing anything to all machines. We're doing something to certain machines. And so we can, we would say pick a label, for instance. So here's the label of machines that I'm going to patch in 15 minutes. Let's wake just those machines up. And when we're broadcasting the traffic based on the MAC address of the machines, the last known subnets they were in, we're trying to pass that traffic. We're trying to get it to the right subnet, to the right machine, to wake those specific machines up. Well, if machines have recently moved around in the network, we might miss a machine or two. So like everything else in the world, it's not absolutely foolproof. But wouldn't patching 85 out of the 100 machines you need to patch overnight be better than patching 0 of the machines? Right? So we do the best we can. We take the good with the bad, and we utilize these types of protocols as best we can. Okay? All right. So I'm going to open up mics here in just a moment, and when I do, let's get a discussion going. Let's get a roundtable going. Okay? I've got some suggested topics here. Are you already using it? Is it working? Is it not working? Let's talk about that. Please speak up. You don't know what you might say that can be really helpful to a fellow customer, can help solve a problem they've been grappling with for quite some time. Okay? You might make somebody else's day. And if you're using it, what are you using it for? Maybe there's some scenarios I didn't even think of that I didn't mention. Right? I'd love to hear. Okay? All right. So I am going to unmute mics. Folks, as always, please remember and please be cognizant of any background noise that you might have. We're going to hear everything that's coming through your mics as soon as I unmute you. So if you've got any noise going on there, you might just immediately mute yourself through the WebEx controls there, and then unmute when you're ready to talk. So here we go.
Yeah, every time they release something, they break.
Okay, I think I got all the offenders there. All right, folks. So looks like we've got some stuff in chat. I'll go ahead and address that first. Okay. How can I send magic packets across different VLANs? Is this something most K1000 users are doing? So Joseph asked this. So we've already addressed how to send it across different subnets. Now, something I should have mentioned, and I kind of did it myself in the presentation today. We oftentimes use terms synonymously that aren't quite synonymous, right? Or aren't necessarily synonymous. For instance, VLANs and IP subnets are two different things. They are quite often, most of the time, maybe even all the time in practice, used in conjunction with each other. But a VLAN doesn't have to necessarily equate to a specific IP subnet and so on. It might be limited to broadcast traffic, for instance. So we kind of use those terms interchangeably, and I think that's what Joseph was doing. He's saying across an IP subnet, which in his environment may match up and mirror perfectly his VLAN structures as well. But I do want to call that out there. It's important to understand that kind of distinction. So we've already addressed how to do that. You're going to have to check on your network equipment, Joseph. But then I would like to know, as you asked there, is this something most K1000 users are doing? We can certainly ask that of the floor today, and anyone who wants to speak up and say whether they are doing it and how. He also asked, opening up the magic packets through different VLANs. So if you do that, does it pose a significant security risk? So leaving aside for the moment that that's a really loaded question, just to speak in generalities, again, we're enabling, and depending on how strict we are, we don't have to enable all broadcast traffic across VLANs. we can specifically, depending on our network equipment and how sophisticated it is, we can allow just certain broadcast traffic, for instance, port 7 UDP, to cross certain VLANs and reduce whatever exposure there might be. But really, broadcast traffic can only do what it can do, right? It's the directed traffic once the connection is established that you're really worried about there. So some Googling there might help to find out what exposure there might be for instance, enabling Wake on LAN packets. And then Jeff and Sandy both brought up a concern. Wake on LAN does not wake Win 7 machines from sleep. What am I doing wrong? Wake a machine from being off works fine. And Sandy similarly said, please discuss Wake on LAN means wake from off, not wake from sleep. Wake from sleep depends on the hardware and drivers and requires enabling specific to that combination. So it's a good call out. Thank you all for mentioning that. So what it has to do with, the term sleep is variable. Okay, there's hibernation. There is what Windows typically means when it says sleep, and there's some kind of different grades of that. How many pieces of hardware we actually fully turn off versus how many are still kind of awake. And sometimes when it goes to sleep, it turns the NIC completely power dead, right? Whereas typically, if I turn a machine off, just Windows shut down or, hold the button down and it turns itself off, it doesn't shut off power accessibility to the NIC. The NIC's not doing anything, but it still has power. And what that means is it could respond to, say, a magic packet from Wake on LAN. But some of the sleep settings that you might use, whether you're talking about the Windows included sleep function or maybe third-party software you've installed, right, that has a little more granular, fine control of the power management features and settings of the hardware, it might not allow that power to the NIC, which means it can't hear, so to speak, and respond to that Wake on LAN magic packet because it doesn't have power to get the signal and to respond to it. So yes, there are some things there that you might have to take into account, the waking it up from power management as opposed to turning it on from power down. There are some different nuances there. It may require certain hardware. It may require certain firmware or configuration settings to enable those other features waking up from power management. Now, me personally, never, ever, ever been a fan of sleep or hibernation or any of that power management junk. Never, ever, ever. Because of this and many other reasons, right? Either I want my machine completely turned on and at full power so it can do everything I want it to do immediately. And of course, no computer's ever been fast enough for me. I'm always tapping my toes, sitting there waiting on it to respond. Or I want it shut off and saving me some money. Right? That's what I want. Black, white, no gray. Right? So I never really ran into that problem because I would immediately disable all the sleeping and hibernation type features on machines that I could in my environment so that they didn't bite me later on in this kind of way. But you might not feel the same way, or you might not be able, you might not have the level of control over your network environment that means you could make those kinds of unilateral decisions and policy statements. So you may run across those issues and you may have to come up with some other alternate solution. And it may be that you can't come up with an automated one. There is no right hardware to buy, or you can't buy hardware, or there is no firmware or BIOS setting that you can set or something. It may be that it becomes a bit more manual. Those machines, you have to establish some other alternate procedure for doing things too. Right? So these are all considerations you want to make. But the great thing about it is, yeah, you didn't get every single machine, right, to wake up and do the thing you wanted to do, but you still got a bunch of them. And every single one that you did get to do it overnight to wake up and do the thing, you're that much better off and you got that much less manual work to do, right? But good call outs there, Jeff and Sandy. And then Nigel asked, so before the Wake on LAN feature can be used by a case adjustments, adjustments have to be made on the network devices. Yes, Nigel, that's what we were going over. Okay, you can read that link that I shared with you earlier that talks about some of the details on Wake on LAN and learn about some of that stuff. But ultimately, what you need to do is investigate your network hardware, switches, routers, firewalls, and find out how they specifically interact with those kinds of features, those kinds of settings. And Jess Beer asked, by the way, I apologize if I ever mess up anybody's name. I'm not doing it on purpose. I apologize in advance. So Jess Beer asked, are there any specific logs associated with Wake on LAN? I'm assuming, Jess Beer, that you mean in the K1000 logs. If you go to the settings module and the logs tab and you look at those logs in the drop-down box. Yeah, the Wake on LAN stuff is logged, I do believe, in one of those logs, but I honestly don't know which one. So what I would probably do is send out a Wake on LAN packet and then go check all the logs really quick and see if I can find some reference to them. And then that'll be the one. And then you can send me an email, contact the training team, and let me know, and you'll have helped out all your other customers. Won't that just give you warm, fuzzy feeling, Jazz Beer?
Thank you.
All right, so that's everything I've got in chat, folks. There's nothing in Q&A, so we're open. Roundtable. You got a microphone? If you're not unmuted and you can't unmute yourself, then just chat me and I'll unmute you. Go ahead. You're here. I'm here. Lots of customers are here. Let's talk. Don't be shy. I didn't tell you everything there is to know about every minute detail of Wake on LAN. You've got to still have some questions. Jasper said, can we check the prereq before we can add machines to Wake on LAN? Can we check the prereq before we can add machines to Wake on LAN? Do you mean can you create a label that's going to identify the ones where Wake on LAN works? You know it works?
Something like that.
Gotcha. Okay, so first of all, Jasper, we can create a machine smart label based on any information that we can make show up in inventory. So if we can craft a custom inventory field that finds out whether Wake on LAN is enabled or not in the BIOS of the machine, then that information would show up in inventory, and therefore we could create a smart label of the machines that have it enabled, and we could wake just those machines. Now,
right.
I don't know that we really get a lot out of being that specific about only trying to wake up the machines that can wake up and not trying to wake up the others. Remember, it's broadcast traffic. It's going to broadcast to every single NIC on the switch anyway, and then only the ones that are identified in the label or in the group of machines that we're targeting are actually going to respond to it and wake up. I mean, broadcast traffic is broadcast traffic. It's going to go to every hot thing plugged into the switch anyway, right? Within that particular subnet or within that particular subnet. So I don't know that we buy a lot, but yeah, we probably could do something like that, Justin. Okay? You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. So, since we don't have a ton of questions, who is currently using Wake on LAN? Please, speak up.
Hey, Ron, I'm using Wake on LAN in our environment.
All right, John, what you using it for, and how's it going?
Everything seems to be running pretty good. I run it
before any patches or Dell updates run, and then I go ahead and run it every morning before employees get here. So every PC is up and running by the time they get to their desk.
Nice. That's not a bad idea, because it can save them that kind of boot up time, especially on slower machines if it's already done. That's not a bad idea.
And then when I was setting it up, so to make sure that everything was powering on correctly, I run a scheduled report, just status of the agent. And so I have that scheduled to run 15 minutes after the wake on LAN, so I can look at that report and see what machines were not turned on, and so went actually to the desks and configured the wake on LAN and the BIOS for those machines.
That's pretty ingenious, John. So let me impose upon you, okay? I'd love for you to write that little scenario up in a blog post at IT Ninja.
All right.
Okay? That's just the kind of information that would be really valuable. A lot of times customers, especially in training, they don't so much want us to teach them how to do something specifically, right? They say, I want to know how to do X, please teach me X. What they really ask a lot of the time is, what should I even want to do? What can the K1000 do? Not so much how to do it, but what are some of the things I don't even know to ask? This is one of those things, right? You've just dramatically improved, say dramatically, in one small way. You've improved the user experience for your users. When they come in the morning, they don't know what has happened overnight. They don't know if their machine is rebooted or whatever. They don't know how many times it might have rebooted. They don't know if it got shut down or turned on or whatever. They get to come in the morning and just sit down, log in, and go. They don't have to wait for it to boot up. You can now enable Pixie as the first boot order on the machine, and they don't even know that that happened because it's already past that point and sitting at the login prompt, right? Which makes it easier for you, too. You get to have that feature enabled, right? The Pixie on first boot, which means you get to use boot actions on the K2, which means you can reimage machines from the seat of your chair, right? So this is exactly the kind of thing that I can now point to users and to my customers and say, look, this is the kind of thing you could be asking about. So outstanding. Thank you so much for speaking up, John. That is genius. And by the way, if you will send me the link to that blog post, I will trumpet it. Okay? Sandy says, we have scheduled Wake on LAN to run before each patching session. There are 10 different schedules. We don't believe it's really waking very many since they're sleeping instead of power off. Yeah, as we discussed in response to your question about that, Sandy, that may be something you've got to address. Maybe you want to change the power management settings on the machines to not enable them, to disable the sleeping mechanism. And then if a user presses the sleep button, have it shut down instead or something. Right? You can also have, you can configure power management that says after X minutes or hours of inactivity to shut the machine down. You can have it shut down between certain hours and so on. You can have it automatically turn, oh, that's another one. So in a lot of the BIOSes, yeah, permission to change that. That's always the rub, right, Sandy? You got IT policies and you got managers deciding things who don't really know what they're doing. So you got to educate your managers so they can implement the right policies. But a lot of BIOSes not only have Wake on LAN support. Let's say you can't use that, it doesn't work, you got subnets you can't change, you're the workstation guy, they don't let you, even suggest change on network, whatever. Let's say you can't use Wake on LAN for whatever reason. Okay? Well, in the BIOSes of machines for the last 15 years, there's the ability to have the machine automatically turn itself on after at a certain time, right? So if I know I'm going to patch at midnight, I could have the BIOSes of my machines configured to turn themselves on at 11:45 p.m. Right? So that's another option. Now, not as great as Wake on LAN, not as great as Wake on LAN, but it beats going and staying there at midnight and going and turn a bunch of machines off manually. Right? It beats not being able to patch overnight. Okay? So that's always an option as well. Who else? Anybody else doing Wake On LAN? John, did you have anything more to add?
I don't think so.
Okay, I really appreciate you being willing to speak out like that. Thank you so much. All right, folks. Anybody else? Any other questions? We're here. Might as well ask. Nothing?
Who's going to win the Super Bowl?
What was that?
Who's going to win the Super Bowl?
Oh, who's going to win the Super Bowl? Denver Broncos. Or I should say, the Denver Peyton Mannings. Because, you know, I'm a Peyton Manning fan. Any other questions? Oh, and the Knowles will repeat as college football national champions. Easy money there. Any other questions, folks? Nothing? All right. Well, hopefully we've answered some questions for you today. Hopefully we've helped you today in some small way to make your job better and easier. I wanted to call out a couple of upcoming KKEs. Next Tuesday, I'm going to do a deep dive on drivers and the K2000, understanding not just the driver feeds that are included, understanding those, exactly what they are, what they consist of, understanding KBE drivers, understanding custom drivers. If you have a machine that's not in the feed, whether it's a Dell or not a Dell or whatever it is, being able to use drivers. Not only that, we're also going to talk about things that sit on top of drivers, right? A lot of things that you would consider that we call drivers, right? That little applet that runs in the sys tray down there near the clock in the bottom right-hand corner of Windows, right? We can right-click and we can change some video settings or some NIC settings or some sound settings or something like that. Right? Those aren't really drivers. Well, we're going to talk about that. Okay? We're going to deep dive some of that stuff and help you to understand how all that stuff works. Okay? And then Thursday, grouping your gadgets. I'm probably going to focus on labels. Okay? We can talk about some other things there, but it's mostly going to be labels, labels, labels. A bunch of different kind of machine labels, device labels, sorry, and how to build them and how they work and what to use them for and all kinds of scenarios. So what I'd love to get from y'all is hit that contact the training team link. You go to case.com/KKE with the 3 links we talked about earlier, right? Upcoming sessions, recording archives, contact the training team. That sends an email to KKEteam@case.com. You can just send an email to that address if you want to. KKEteam@case.com. And tell me some device labels, machine labels you'd like to see. Some good, useful ones, maybe ones you already have, maybe ones you haven't figured out how to build yourself. Give me some examples, and I promise you I will cover them in that session. Okay? You're in control. You're in charge. You send me what you want to see, and we will do it. And that goes for anything. Anything you want us to do in KKE, send me the email, let me know. Okay? All right. Well, I'll let y'all go get a few extra minutes back in your day. Thank you so much for coming, and I will talk to you later. See y'all next time.